All right, hello everyone, and welcome. It is Wednesday, November 30th, and we are here in week 2. You've turned in your first round of assignments, and we have some peer review to do this afternoon. We have 6 submissions, and we're going to take a listen to those. So you can see everybody's names laid out here on different tracks. And then for this composition, let me just zoom in here. Let's do that. For this submission, you had 3 main loops, and this is just kind of dragged all into a track, so I'm going to separate everything out here so that it organizes a little bit better. Over here we have, I think these are all the intro files, and so we'll just grab all these intros. Kind of bring them over here. And we are going to take a listen to each one of these, listening to the main loops first, probably, so that we kind of get an overall view of the composition and the instrumentation. And then we will listen to the intros and the endings. Here again, this is a column of all of the intro cues and all of the ending cues over here. And they're just in this order because of how they are imported in alphabetically. So we'll jump around taking a listen to each one of these. So let's start out overall talking about just things that we can see visually and the kinds of feedback and things that we are paying attention to. So we'll start over here on the main loops. Again, you had a total of 9 files that you delivered, 3 different categories: intros, main loops, and endings. And this is a very common setup for music in a game. Certainly not all games, but a lot of more simple games, puzzle games, kids games, casual games might take on this kind of format. If you have a level, let's say a puzzle level, it might be very smart to have the music that starts up in the start of the level. Then you have music that plays throughout, whether it's just one looping file, or in this case 3 or 10 individual pieces of music that might rearrange in some sort of way. And then when you either win or lose, currently in our game there's really no winning. I mean, you just keep going and the score goes higher and higher and higher. But we definitely have a losing. So we have our ending represents that end in our game, or it would represent the end of a game. Typically it branches off into winning and losing. So very common setup here. In our main loops, we have main loop 1, 2, and 3. Of course, when I'm going through all this and paying attention to the file names as we take a look at them and make sure that nothing's going to work in the game if the files are not set up correctly. So your main loops need to be 8-bar loops. They need to have continuous instrumentation in each one of them. So it feels like the same band was playing all of the music, but then it changes, the composition changes, melody, maybe some harmonic progression, and the drum pattern or bass line changes and has variation from one cue to the next, so that it's not the same repeating pattern all the way through the entire gameplay. They are 8-bar loops. We want to make sure that there is change and development through one of the 8-bar loops. Through each of the 8-bar loops, but each one of them should have change and variation over those 8 bars. It should not just repeat the same 2-bar phrase over and over and over again and then repeat it in all of the main loops. It's repetitive enough in the fact that you really only have 3 8-bar loops that you're working with for most of the music. So by that nature, you don't want to make it any more repetitive by putting in an 8-bar loop, putting 4 2-bar loops or 2 4-bar loops. What else? Most of these look pretty good. This one here in the middle, we have a change between main loop 1 and 2 and then main loop 3, so I'll have to take a listen to that. All of them seem like they are set up to loop so that there are no gaps at the end of each one of the files. So that as we listen to each one of them, they will make sense as they loop around and around. Of course, we'll pay attention to the composition. You don't want to, sometimes we'll have a 12-bar phrase in an 8-bar loop, meaning that you halfway through your musical thought, it just kind of cuts off and starts over again. We want to watch out for the attack or the reset of all of the instrumentation as it switches from one thing to the next. You don't want it to really feel like a strong, that's not right, I was going to say an obvious shift, but you don't want to be able to identify where the seams are in the music. So everything is in nice 8-bar phrases and they transition smoothly. All right, so those are some of the ideas in our main loops. These are all of our intro files. Our intro files are 2 bars long, and they need to transition into the main loops as seamlessly as possible. So typically an intro will build up over time in volume and intensity. It should use the drums and the melody and the harmony, all of the instrumentation to kind of rise up to that build. Then everything should transition from the end of the intro cue to the beginning of the next main loop, or whichever main loop is chosen. So generally this is what it would look like, where you would have an intro chosen and then a main loop would play right into, from the ending of the intro, right into the main loop. So you want to make sure that that transition is as seamless as possible. And then the challenge is all 3 of these intro files have to work against any combination of these 3. It's not always going to be in the same order. And then it also has to work with all of your ending files. So our ending cues here, number 1, first and foremost, they need to end. They need to end the music. They need to resolve your musical thought. They need to come to a strong or solid resolution that would require the drums, the bass, harmony, melodic instruments, everything. Drums typically might do some fill to a final crash. The bass line resolves back, and the chord progression resolves back to the tonic. The melody resolves probably back to the tonic. Everything hems up nicely with the bow, and you have enough time to decay to silence. So these look like they're set up pretty well. These look like they are quite low in volume compared to, like, especially this one over here. So you want to make sure that these will, volume and intensity wise and instrumentation, transition from the main loop cues. These look like they're set up properly. These look like they're set up properly. These also look like they're set up, but it seems like there's quite a bit of a gap. I mean, who knows if there might be a really long reverb tail in here or something, but you probably just shorten those down as much as needed. And then 3 endings. These look like they are set up correctly. Did I mention these? These 3 intro files are not going to work because there's quite a large gap at the end of the files. So when it actually builds, it'll stop, go to silence, and then drop into the main loops whenever those happen. So you should edit these down also. Rebounce them down. All right. So that is visually the things that we are listening for. Let's, or visually the things that we are looking at. Let's actually go ahead and listen to things. And again, we'll just go through one at a time, listening to the main loops. We'll make sure that we can still hear me. Make sure we don't blast the music. Yeah. And after all the feedback, if you have any questions, let me know. Send me messages. I'm working through all of the grading, and we'll get that back to you, and then you have the opportunity by the end of this week to take all of the input and feedback, make any revisions, make any changes, and resubmit it to update the grade. All right, let's listen to our first main loop. Let's do that again. Nice energy through the cue, a good melody line through each one of the cues with variation, some good changes from the first half and the second half. The main thing I hear would be with the harmony and bass and drums. That really seems quite consistent all the way through. While the melody does change nicely, having some variation in maybe the hi-hat pattern or where the kick is going. You probably want to keep that snare on 2 and 4. Maybe change the progression, because I know in the second half of each one of these progressions you kind of go to a minor tonality and then you resolve it nicely back. So just maybe, you don't need to do that in all 3 of them. You certainly keep it in one of them, and then change up the drums in one of them, or change up the drums in both of them, and maybe change up the harmonic progression in one or both of them. So that will help give a bit more variation to those. And 3 intro cues. All right, so each one of them build up nicely. It does kind of feel like I'm missing the lead. You could definitely use the lead through the intro cues to kind of help the build and not just have those that main melody come in at the main loops. So add the melodic line through there, add that synth. 3 endings. Let's do these. Very good. That works. Cool. Very good. All 3 of those work nicely. They all resolve back to the tonic and delay, kind of bounce out to silence. So that will work. All 9 of these, all of the files are formatted well. They are going to work in the game, so just some small changes through those, some more variation through the main loops. Add the melodic line in the intros, because I think you have them in the endings, so add them to the intros also. Very good. Good way to start out. Looks like maybe some drums come in this 3rd main loop. These 2 levels are quite low overall. All right, so main loop 3 is way better than 1 and 2, and that's not just not compositionally really, because 1 and 2 work just fine, It's just the mix overall. I was about to say that I think most of what you have in main loop 1 and 2 is good. It just seems like a lot of stuff is buried there somewhere in the mix, and you should improve the mix and kind of bring that out a little bit, and then that's exactly what you did in the third one. Like, you can hear so much more detail, there's more instrumentation. If you don't have all that stuff going on, like you have the harpsichord or banjo or something in there, plus the string line. The drums are way more detailed. I'm just wondering if this is like just an error with the bounce or the mix on these ones. So whatever you're doing in 3, do that more to 1 and 2. So most of these are pretty close overall. For this first one, I would avoid just having the 4 count off in the front. I do like the second half for the build. I think I like that probably the most. 2 and 3 sound a bit more like they don't have as much build through them. Let's see. Yeah, this almost feels like a 2-bar loop. There's a little bit from the drums in there, like a little snare roll at the end. Almost feels like a train beat. There's a bit more from intro 3, but maybe you could add a little bit more power to that, and it could also be a mix thing too, if that suffered the same thing, like these probably are. Yeah, again, compositionally, I think they work just fine. Make sure you are using all of the same instrumentation really through all the cues, or better way of saying it, whatever shows up in the main loops should also show up in the intros. What else? That's most of it. Yeah, I think it's more of a mix. I think content-wise, you have a lot of what's necessary. All right. Let's keep going. We'll try the next one. Looks like we pull down the levels here a little bit. Zoom back in. And we'll try this one. So, some cool ideas in here. One of the main things that I think is holding it back is the repetition, where you should focus more on a melodic instrument that kind of develops all the way through. I really like the sound. I really like what's going on here in main loop 3. But it just kind of repeats the phrase over and over again. So if that guitar could, or whatever stringed instrument that could dance around a little bit more. Yeah, working on, and the rhythm here works very well because it kind of bounces around a bit. You want to make sure that the instrumentation is a little bit more consistent, or I guess the drum set is a bit more consistent. guess it's the same sounds, but I don't know. I guess kind of focus on what you're doing over here through 1 and 2 a bit more, while also kind of removing the repetition in the phrasing of everything. Because the rhythmically and energy-wise, I definitely like it, especially that third one. Two and three work very well, especially since they're kind of recognizable overall. One little note maybe here, I guess the dissonance kind of works through there, but that could clean up a little bit. This first one sounds almost like an ending, where it feels like it's about to resolve. It's like it doesn't, but it's. I guess maybe it's that some of that is the downward direction that it's going. Let's do these. Again, I like the third one. Come on. Maybe have the guitar there and on the last hit also, not do the little bit at the end. This one feels a little off with the syncopated rhythm. But overall, again, really good ideas. Good things to work off of, just kind of tweaking the ideas and working on a variation through them. Oops. Next one here. What am I doing? Sorry. Throwing Pro Tools commands at it. It doesn't like that. All right. Next. All right, cool. I like the energy of it. I like the kind of all the instrumentation and the bounce and the feel of it. Going cue by cue. This first one, the trumpet here, the brass sounds a little odd, a little too synthy, kind of buzzy sound to it. Plus the second half is quite similar to the first half in the progression. So you have better lead instruments in the other cues. Maybe use some staccato in that with the brass will help. Different articulations. Maybe it's also different velocities. Will give some variation. I like the change. I like the changes from one cue to the next. This one, I know the melody changes or the rest of the instrumentation, but the progression also makes it feel a bit repetitive. But this third one's the best melodic development through the full 8 bars. The piano line. just better phrasing of the melody overall, much more hummable and memorable. Overall, work on some quantization too, just tightening up some of the performances so everything stays on that just nice and steady there. Intros. All right, I think you have the right idea. Like the piano works there. Trumpet's a little sloppy back and forth on that one. This one works well for the build. Watch the piano, feels like the velocity is a little machine gun. Da 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 da. Not the rhythm. The rhythm of it works. But some velocity difference will make that a little bit more realistic. But you have the right idea compositionally with the kind of hanging on the 5 there as it goes back to the 1. Yep. Yep. I would probably include the trumpet in the second one if it's in 1 and 3, just to make that part consistent. And quantization. Just tighten everything up so that it hits nicely on all those little flourishes or the phrases on the 8s and hit, kind of riding right into that last chord. All that stuff needs to be pretty solid. But again, compositionally, very good. Working in the right direction. And let's do these next main loops. Okay. So, some very cool stuff happening in there. Really cool change from a lot of the other things that we were hearing. A much more kind of a electronic synthy kind of feel to it. Let's go one by one. A couple things. Let's just see if it works. The endings. We got to watch out for things like the builds and rises and crashes and all that stuff, because they'll exist every single time it loops around. So you want to make sure that nothing gets cut off. It seems like a lot of that stuff that was building just kind of gets cut off, and you don't get the satisfying reverb tail and kind of finished with all those sounds. There is quite a... I guess the changes from one to the next should probably be actually work quite well. This one's a little bit sparse compared to the other ones. Not much going on. Again, a lead line. This one has more of it. Phonato-arpeggiator. This one is a little bit sparse in that way. Again, good change. The only thing with this kind of change here is that you kind of know where you are. Like with these, at least with that snare on the 2 and 4, you kind of lose it in the background where it's changed and where you are in the music. But when you hit this, you know that you don't know that's main loop 3, but you know it's that cue. So that may or may not be good or bad. Just something to consider overall. So I'd say watch the turnarounds and watch the loops to make sure all of that stuff that's dancing around is caught back at the front of the file. Yeah, edit down the intros. This feel mostly like effects, and are probably a really good layer of full intro. Use drums, use the kicks and the snares, at least in this style of music, to build that and use that rise. This would be a really, well, actually you kind of have, where you used all those rises and turnarounds in the main loops. These are definitely a good place for all that stuff, which is mostly what you have here. I would watch for the little pause in intro 3. You want to keep building all the way until it drops into the main loops. Yeah, you can edit out all the silence on these. Okay. 3, probably the best of the 3, and 2 works. The thing with 1 is that it basically ends on the first beat of the first bar. I mean, you have each of those hits, but there's a pretty sudden stop to the music. So with these, you at least use some of that rhythm to end everything. So a small note there. The editing of the intros is probably going to be the biggest thing that would be really obvious to listeners. All right, let's try the last one here. Cool, another synthy one. All right, I like the groove through each one of them. The kind of synth feel across everything works well. The main thing I'm hearing really would be the melody. Watch out, you really just kind of feel like you're following the chord progressions. Would like to hear the melody move beyond the chord shapes, and basically you state a phrase, then you shift the chord and you state that exact same thing again in that new chord. So the third one, now it's still kind of doing the same thing. So just move, keep the same chord progression. Do the drums change? They're kind of the same on the first and the third, but they changed to the second one. So there's appropriate changes there. And I like the changes that you do in the first half, second half, and like the kind of textural change to kind of shorten the decay on the third one here. But yeah, work on the melody, work on developing the melody beyond the chords, the chord progression. 3 intros. So I'd try for a little bit more build through the second half of each one, and then try for more variation from the second and third. Just don't alternate between the same pattern. Do, 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 do. Just kind of vary. Keep that in intro 1 and vary it into 2 and 3. And 3 endings. Cool. You hit it on the third one. You ended on beat 1 of bar 2. Each one of these kind of had a little bit into beat 2 or something. Boom. Stop. 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 So yeah, each one of those is beat 1, bar 2. Exactly. All right. So good stuff overall. We saw a couple of different approaches to your first game composition. The good thing is pretty much what I talked about was enhancing what you already had there. Certainly wasn't, oh, it totally doesn't going to work, scratch it and start all over again. Most of what it was take what you had and evolve it a little bit further, or watch out for this, or change that, or whatever it is. And most of it was, kind of massaging what you already have, taking it, doing some revisions, maybe a little remixing to it, rebouncing the files, and testing it out one more time in the game and making sure that it works overall. So good approach on these submissions. And for all of those watching on the archive, hopefully if you see kind of how this works in the first round, I might encourage you to submit for peer review 2 in week 2. So it's a great opportunity for us to talk our way through it. And if you're available for the live class, we can certainly chat about any of those aspects in the class and ask questions and go back and forth. But I definitely would certainly encourage everybody to participate in this, because for the individuals, yes, it's good that I go through your project. Everybody's going to get written feedback. The kind of when I go through your game descriptions, I'll take your screenshots and listen to the music and watch the videos and just kind of see how everything is formatted and how everything works, give some insight there. But to visually step my way through it and point at stuff and talk my way through things can certainly provide more detail. So for the individual, it's all well and good for their project. But for everybody else, whether you submit it or not, you get to see how everybody else is doing it. All the good things that you should try out and all the bad things that you should avoid. And you kind of get some insight into how other people would approach the project. So definitely submit your composition for next round, and let me know if you have any questions on anything that you see here. Thanks.